Good afternoon and welcome to Higher Ed Live, your home for digital development and professional empowerment. Our web shows and podcasts are always free and accessible to you at higheredlive.com as well as iTunes. Greetings, I am not your usual host. Today I'm filling in, but my name is Patrick Powers. I'm a project manager at mStoner, a firm that's been telling higher ed stories since 2001. And today I'm thrilled. I've got some fantastic guests with us today. I'm thrilled to welcome Elizabeth Smith and Deb Maui to the show. We'll be talking about the latest trends in higher education marketing, as well as providing some insight into the upcoming AMA Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education in Austin, Texas. But we can't do that first without acknowledging a couple of our sponsors, OmniUpdate and mStoner, those that make it possible to even have this show in the first place. OmniUpdate is the leading web CMS provider for higher education. The company focuses on providing an exceptional customer experience to its 40,000 plus OU Campus CMS users around the globe. OU Campus is secure and scalable with great tools and features, plus deployment flexibility. So if you need a CMS, visit www.omniupdate.com. So thank you to OmniUpdate, and thank you to my employer, mStoner, the marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Need an innovative solution? Learn about mStoner, the award-winning firm working exclusively with higher ed at mstoner.com. And with that, I would like to officially welcome Elizabeth and Deb to the show. And so let's kick this off. I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, what you do, and get this conversation started.
Thanks, Patrick. My name's Elizabeth Smith. I'm the Associate Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at St. Mary's College of California. We're located in the Bay Area of San Francisco.
Great, thank you. And Deb.
Hi, Patrick.
Long time no talk, right?
I know. I'm Deb Maui. I am a senior strategist at mStoner. But I am not here wearing my mStoner hat today. I am here wearing my AMA Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education hat, and I'm very excited to talk about that today.
Yes, that is correct, and that's the one of the things I want to bring up. Both of you are co-chairs, or on the committee. I'm sorry, for the AMA Symposium for Marketing of Higher Education. As part of that committee, I know you put together a fantastic program that kind of reflects what we're seeing in our field today. And so in going through the proposals and selecting what topics would be talked about, I imagine you hit upon some trends. So let's dive right on into it. You know, going through some of those and in building that program, what do you see happening out there in higher education marketing? What's changing? What's evolving? And I'll start with you, Elizabeth.
Well, you know, I think the category that I really worked on for the conference is called Marketing in Action, and so I think that what we're seeing is an even greater emphasis on outcomes, on analytics, on kind of tracking success and making sure that the strategies and tactics that we're implementing are working. And so we saw a lot of people really with an outcome orientation and a lot of focus on recruitment marketing, philanthropic marketing, but with that outcomes focus. I don't know, Deb, if we want to switch off and maybe have another idea.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No, I just want to build on what Elizabeth said. First of all, we're really excited about the lineup this year. We think we have a great program. The committee had a really difficult task this year because we had a record number of proposals submitted, and I think there were over 160. Correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, but
That's right.
we had a really difficult but very exciting challenge because we had so much to choose from. Am I on the screen?
You are.
Okay, because I'm saying okay. So I just want to build on what Elizabeth said, because I think that one of the big trends we are seeing is measurement and focusing on outcomes. And I've been going to the AMA Symposium for a lot of years. And when I first started attending, there were a lot of presentations about activities, but there really wasn't a lot of focus on the outcomes, and so we're really pleased that so many of the presentations are really focused not only on the activities but also the outcomes. And then I think more broadly than that, we're seeing a lot more proposals about how you measure. So how do you measure the results of your recruiting and marketing activities? How do you set up campaigns so that you can track results? How can you get all of your systems working together so that you can track somebody from an initial point of inquiry through to an enrolled student and really know what's working and what's not working? So I think those are the two things. It's not only the focus on outcomes of specific initiatives, but it's also just teaching people how you can be better about measuring what you do and get better going forward and smarter.
And what do you see driving this? Is this the data becoming more and more available, or is this a push from higher ups that are demanding a little more accountability for marketing dollars, or combination?
I think it's both. I think that they're related. I think that one of the barriers has always been getting all of these systems to talk to each other. So you have to get your ERP system talking to your CRM system. And these are often systems that don't play nicely together, right? So, and there are lots of different people involved in managing those systems, plus different people managing the website. So it's been difficult getting all of the data that you need to get to be able to measure. And so I think this, as senior leadership has gotten more interested in outcomes, they've put plans in place, teams in place, task forces in place to really be able to look at the issue of measurement and make it happen.
And as someone who's on the day-to-day, Elizabeth, are you seeing this play out at your campus? I mean, are people more aware or cognizant of the role that data is playing and how we market?
Well, I think that I'm more aware, and my staff is more aware in the Office of College Communications. I think that some of our leadership, because the marketing functions in higher education are maturing, I think that leadership doesn't know what to expect from us, and so it's kind of there's a groundswell of support for this idea of measurement that's coming up from the communications offices, and then as presidents and strategic plans are written. I know that I can speak from my experience here at St. Mary's. We have a new strategic plan, and building reputation, understanding engagement. It's all over that. So there's a mandate at the highest level to be able to demonstrate effectiveness. And so I think that, I think it's kind of coming from all sides. It's coming up. Marketers want to be smarter about the work that they're doing. We're all overwhelmed. We want to know what's the most high impact work that we can be doing. Like Deb said, we want to know where are our folks coming from, how are they coming in the funnel, how can we get more of them in the funnel on the recruitment side. On the alumni side, we want to know how to best serve and engage those folks. And so I think measurement gives us a key to understanding kind of all of those interactions, either in parts or in sum total, as Deb was talking about.
Right. And do you see any areas where data is being used well? I know we mentioned CRMs, and that seems to be a place or a nugget where data is being used, or other places where it's being underutilized, maybe in terms of annual giving or engagement with alums?
I think that the challenge is that there's so much data, and so it's not a lack of data per se. It's about really knowing what to do with the data. So the challenge is to take all of that information and put it together in a meaningful way. So, you know, web analytics are a perfect example. There are tons of measures that you can look at, but the focus is really turning to, okay, well, what do we do with all of that data? What do we look at? Why are we looking at it? And how do we put it all together in a way that tells a story about whether our website is doing what we want it to do, which is, you know, primarily driving student enrollment and giving.
Right. Right. And, you know, I spent a lot of time in Google Analytics. And
I know you do.
Yeah, too much time, probably. But the amount of data that you could gather is really staggering, and I think you kind of hit on it, or at least what I'm seeing in working with clients on this is, you know, you could download spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet of data and information, but how does that tie with the institutional goals you already have in place? And, you know, I can tell you a million different metrics that are tracked in Google Analytics, but what are the ones that matter to me and demonstrate that what I'm doing is adding value to an organization, is advancing, you know, our goals, and really being effective. You know, I think that's part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think you see a lot of emphasis on dashboards too. You know, the idea that there needs to be a clean way of really staking a claim on these are the metrics that are important, kind of building on what Deb said, which are the ones that tell us where we want to go, what we need to be doing. And so I know that that's an emphasis here at St. Mary's is how do we wade through all the things that are available to us and really boil it down to those key metrics that can drive decision making at the leadership level, so that we're informing leadership of all of the information that they need as they're kind of building strategic plans and we're mapping the future of the college.
Right.
Patrick, you asked about an area where data is underutilized, and I'm not sure that I would say that data is underutilized in this area, but I think that there's a lot of interest in figuring out how you measure changes in brand awareness and perception over time, and I think there'll be a lot of discussion about that at the symposium. How do you know, institutions are spending a lot of money to articulate their brands in a very powerful way. How do you measure the changes in brand perception over time without spending, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, doing survey research? So it's I can't guarantee that we have it all figured out and there'll be answers necessarily around that at the symposium, but I know there'll be a lot of really good discussion around it because there are a lot of people who are exploring the topic and really starting to put the pieces together.
Right. That was one of the things I noticed in going through the list of presentations was, you know, there seems to be this realization about a growing realization about the importance of brand. You know, it used to be just get me more students, right? I think there's this recognition about how important a brand is to an institution. And so how are schools branding themselves? Is this evolving or changing? You know,
that's a hot topic at the conference, just like every year.
It's an ongoing trend, right?
Yeah, and I think there's some. I think if you think about the symposium as a litmus test for that issue, the kinds of conversations have changed. It used to be, this is how we rolled out a brand, and I think people are getting more sophisticated and more interested in what, like Deb said, what do you do next? Okay, so you rolled out a brand. How do you make sure that what you've done is effective? How do you make it extend through multiple channels? How do you use content to drive brand messages? And so that's one of the things that I really am interested in. That's kind of coming up too. Not to change the subject, but I think it's an expression of brand, and that is the idea of content marketing. I think content marketing is something that universities and colleges have been doing for a really long time because we have stories of people, and that's really what drives our storytelling. But I think thinking about it through the lens of brand, of what are the themes that we need to express the brand strategically, and what are the stories to do that, and how do we get those stories in front of the right people I think it's a new way of thinking. I know here at St. Mary's, one of our big efforts, Jo Schroyer, who's our Director of Marketing Communications, has really taken this on, where we look at content as a big bucket and try to figure out where's the best place for that content to go and to be served up to advance the brand and to inform people about St. Mary's College. So to drive enrollment, to drive alumni engagement, but understanding that it's all the same content. It's just being served up in different ways depending on the audience.
Yeah, I agree with what Elizabeth said. I think, you know, we've been seeing brand proposals at the symposium for a number of years. You know, the last 5 or 6 years we've seen an increasing number of proposals about brand each year. So it's been a hot topic. It continues to be a hot topic. But I think that when people first started talking about branding in higher ed, the assumption was, okay, you do a brand project, okay, we're done with that, you know, let's move on to the next thing. And I think what people are realizing is that it's not something that you do once. It's something that really requires ongoing management, ongoing measurement, ongoing tweaking. So it's seen now as much more of a continuing thing. I think now I totally lost my train of thought. Went to Cleveland. So I think that the emphasis has shifted a bit, and I also think we're seeing a lot more institutions looking to external audiences and doing market research to really inform the brand, and really, so that, because ultimately, I remembered what I was going to say, because ultimately the brand, the institutional brand needs to be meaningful for each audience. So the institutional brand has to be translated into meaningful messages based on what each audience is looking for from the institution. So prospective students want something different from an institution than alumni do. So how do you take the brand and create meaningful, you know, benefit-oriented messaging ties to content, as a content strategy, as Elizabeth was saying, but it's important that you turn those into meaningful messages. So we're seeing that sort of that evolution of branding as well into how do you really take it and implement it fully across your audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And how has you know, kind of the digital age, right? The recognition of the importance of a website, you know, the evolution of social media impacted the way that people go about this work? You know, is it just adding channels for people to measure and dive into? Is it complicating things, making things easier?
Well, it's making things scarier. I mean, you know, it's you know, because people don't have complete control over their brand anymore. Not that you ever did, really, but there's just less control now, particularly because of social media. So it requires a lot more tracking, you know, of what's being said about the brand. It requires a lot more management across different channels. So I don't think it's changed the way you talk about the brand necessarily. Those tools have changed that, but I think that it's certainly made it more challenging. I don't know, Elizabeth, what do you think?
Well, I think it relates back to that content strategy piece, where the right message through the right channel at the right time is how you have to think about your brand and how you're disseminating messages, and because of the feeding the beast of social media, so to speak, is creating a whole new dimension of work for our offices. And so I think social media brings a lot of opportunity for us. I think it creates the direct conversation that we've wanted for a really long time, particularly on the alumni side. it empowers our audiences, our constituents to engage with us directly, and I think that's really great in advancing a brand too. Particularly, like for example, St. Mary's is very focused on personal connection. It's a smaller institution. You know, we have a curriculum that's based on conversation, and so the idea of social media for us is like right in our wheelhouse, because it's the one-to-one, it's the conversation, and so I think social media is great for especially smaller schools to expand the reach of the brand. We're able to get in front of people that we never were before, but it also is a challenge to be relevant, to be interesting, to be on 24/7. So I think it's a great part of the marketing mix.
How in tune, from a 50,000 foot level, how in tune do you think that in higher education institutional leadership is on board with this idea that a brand is ongoing, it costs money to do research, content marketing is important, it costs money to to staff these channels? Are higher ed leaders, in the most general sense, on board with this plan?
Well, to give you the consultant answer, it depends. It's a hard question to answer from a 50,000 foot level, because it really depends on the leader. And so some are, some aren't. But I think at any institution, it's an evolution, right? I mean, it's not. No leader is going to just say, okay, here are 5 more people to do social media. It just doesn't happen. No one has the resources to do that. So I think at any I shouldn't say at any institution, but at a typical institution, the resources and the staffing sort of catch up with the work over time. As there's a realization that social media is taking more time, managing all of these channels is taking more time, and more staffing is needed. So, but Elizabeth can probably answer that question better than I can, because she's on the inside.
Yeah, but we're all inside. So I think yes, I can speak from my institution. I can tell you, my career has been going from place to place that's gotten the marketing bug. So I think that yes, for several years now, it has been becoming more and more seen as a strategic function that needs to be invested in. You hear buzz of lots of different presidents waking up one day and saying, oh yeah, it's a competitive marketplace and we need to market ourselves, and that means that there needs to be resources. So I think that there is the increasing competition in the marketplace for both students and philanthropic dollars is driving a greater awareness of the need to be competitive, and as a result, our functions are being resourced more like they would at a traditional business. And so I think that I think that as the higher ed marketplace continues to grow more competitive over time, you'll see this even more. But I do think that leaders, presidents, are waking up to the idea that they can't depend on word of mouth reputation. That it has to be a more strategic function, and that you if you don't manage it yourself, it'll get managed for you, like Deb was saying.
I think that the fact that we're seeing a lot of institutions hiring chief marketing officers indicates that there is a real understanding now of marketing and the role of marketing and the need for it in an institution. So I think leaders are definitely coming around.
Right. Do you see that trend continuing, and continued increase in CMOs across higher ed?
I was named CMO of St. Mary's this summer. So
congratulations!
So there was a recognition here that that's a position that we need. That as we go into our next strategic plan, we need an owner of that. And I think there are CMOs popping up and being named CMO, which is the difference. There have been people acting as CMOs for a really long time.
Right.
This is a recognition of the professionalism and the leadership and the strategic direction of the marketing function within higher ed, and naming it by putting someone at the helm and naming them that. So I think that's it's all a part of the coalescing around this idea that we can't afford to not be in control of our marketing functions and not be strategic about them. So,
right.
And also a recognition that there needs to be someone in charge of marketing for the entire institution. Maybe not from a a formal roles and responsibilities standpoint, but certainly from an accountability standpoint. Someone who is really responsible for the overall brand, the overall marketing strategy of the institution, and the recognition that there does need to be an integrated approach to marketing versus the old way, whereas, alumni relations did their thing, enrollment did their thing. There's a recognition that it all needs to be looked at cohesively and in an integrated fashion.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that I know from my experience is that oftentimes the resources have existed solely in the programs that were revenue generating, for themselves. MBA programs are notorious for having a lot more money than other areas of the institution, and that is, I think those institutional functions to bring everyone together are being better resourced. I don't think they're being. I don't know that they're being massively resourced, but I do think that the institutional function is what Deb's saying, which is a coordinator, an integrator, a person who can get everybody kind of singing from the same sheet of music. And then also there's a growing resource being allocated to that institutional function to also, beyond coordination, begin to get the message out at an institutional level.
I think we're also seeing CMOs being invited to the table for conversations that they haven't been invited to before. So conversations about tuition pricing strategy,
yeah.
Conversations about new programs. Historically, a faculty member had an idea for a new program and it got approved by the committee, and then marketing, they came to marketing and said, okay, find some students. Now more and more we're seeing the CMO brought into the conversations about new program development from the beginning, saying, should we launch this program or should we launch this program, and really looking at the enrollment potential up front. So we're not seeing that across every institution, certainly, but we're starting to see it. We're starting to see it more and more. So we're helping. I think that's another thing we're trying to do with the symposium, is really help marketing leaders understand their role in those conversations, so that when they have the opportunity to be brought into them, they're prepared for those conversations. So
you made me think about another thing that's happening is that CMOs are coming from consumer and other industries into higher ed because they realize how great it is to be in higher ed.
I was just going to bring that up. If I peruse through the list of presentations and presenters, I see a lot of AVPs, a lot of VPs. I see a keynote from Scott McClellan, who did just what you said. Came from public service as a White House staffer, now to VP of Communications at Seattle University. Yeah.
So, and last year we had the new CMO who's now at Northwestern, Mary
Baglivo.
And she came from the consumer, or from advertising.
Right.
So you see a lot of industry crossover happening with higher ed because it's a great place to be.
Right. And you had kind of touched on it a little bit there, Deb, where CMOs are being invited in these conversations, about what programs to offer, who to reach out to. One of the things that I noticed in a lot of the program information was about this targeting non-traditional audiences, adult learners, online learners, veterans. Is this a trend that we're seeing, people targeting their marketing efforts towards specific audiences that aren't the typical 16, 17, 18-year-olds?
Well, again, it depends on the institution, but absolutely, adult students are a market that more and more institutions are looking at. And I think the challenge with the non-traditional student is that unlike the traditional 18-year-old, who you know where they are, right? They're all in high school,
Right.
so they're pretty easy to find. You don't know where the adult students are, so it requires a different approach to marketing, a much more mass-oriented approach, usually advertising in some form. That is, just very different from the traditional search that you do for an undergraduate. So I absolutely, we're going to see the focus on non-traditional students continue. There are a lot of them out there, and it's a source of growth opportunity for a lot of institutions.
Great. And what else are we going to see at this BMA symposium? Are there any other trends that we might have missed? And then we talked, we've kind of been all over the place about building brand, non-traditional audiences, content marketing. We didn't really touch so deeply on social media, but it seems that this is still a growing topic, still something that is on the upswing.
Yeah, well, if you look at the tracks that we have this year, I think they reflect a lot of those trends. So I'm going to try to recite them off the top of my head, but I may need Elizabeth to help me. So we have marketing in action, digital strategy, marketing intelligence, Austin City No Limits, which is the sort of catch-all bucket for things that don't fit in any other one. And Elizabeth, help me out.
Marketing operations.
Oh, marketing operations.
Brand strategy.
And brand strategy. Of course, how could I forget brand strategy?
Right.
So, I think the one trend we didn't really talk about is so much is the marketing in action, and that's really about how you take the brand and implement it across all of your different audiences and across all of your different channels. And so I think we've had a track like that before, but I think the emphasis now is really much more on an integrated marketing approach, and really with much more of a focus on implementing the brand versus just sort of one-off programs. I'm sorry?
And outcomes, too.
And outcomes, right.
And so that's a great recap of what we can expect this year. If I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, right? You have one there, I'm sure, in your offices.
I do.
Look into 2016, 2017, 2018. Are we going to still be hashing out some of these same topics, or will we be evolving and moving on, to the next level? And what does that next level look like?
I was surprised that we didn't see more mobile this year in the proposals that came in. And so I think that maybe people are implementing mobile strategies, gearing up to be more mobile-centric, and that we'll see more mobile-oriented marketing presentations in the future.
And what do you mean when you say mobile?
I mean, how is a mobile strategy different for recruiting students, for engaging alumni, than using the traditional kind of web social media channels? I know that we're having to change the way that we do some of our tactics to be mobile first, to really think about, we recently ran a digital advertising campaign, and more than half of the clicks that we got were on mobile. So what does that channel bring in terms of people looking at their phones to do business with you, and how do you have to change and adapt? What strategies are different based on the teeny tiny screen or the tablet versus sitting at a computer, or people's mindset and how that changes when you're thinking about marketing interactions when I'm waiting in a line at a restaurant versus when I'm sitting at my computer and really paying attention to you? How am I talking to those people differently? And so I just think that there's a lot of exploration that's going to happen around, particularly around new student recruitment, and mobile devices, and how we're using those platforms to advance students through the funnel from inquiry all the way to application, knowing what we know about how they're interacting with us on their smaller devices.
I also think that people have been looking at mobile very transactionally. So how do people do the transactions that they want on mobile? And I think there's a big question about how do you communicate a brand on through a mobile device. And I don't think anyone's really started to tackle that yet, because it's a really tough challenge. You don't have a lot of space. Yeah. So how do you do it? So I think we're going to start to see that. Yeah. I think we will continue to see more and more focus on analytics and measurement. Yeah. Because people are crying out for it. They really are trying to figure out how to measure everything and get smarter and more focused and on the right things. And so they're looking for help with that. And as people start to figure it out more and more, I think that we're going to see an even more emphasis on that, on analytics and measurement in the years to come, and sort of putting all the puzzle pieces together. So not just how do you measure the results of one activity, but really how do you look at whether all of your marketing efforts, from defining the brand all the way through to each of your tactics, is moving the needle on the enrollment and fundraising objectives and whatever other business objectives you're trying to meet as an institution. So that's my other prediction. And Elizabeth touched on content strategy before, and we didn't really talk about it a whole lot. I agreed with everything that she said about it, but I do think that we're going to continue to see more and more focus on integrated content strategy across platforms, across marketing tactics, and a much more integrated and intentional fashion. So really looking at, we have these brand messages, how do we communicate them through all of these different content vehicles in a way that is providing meaningful information to our audiences. So not only how do we communicate the brand, but how do we help people with what they're trying to figure out in their lives at any given point. So.
On the practical end, on the content strategy, integrated content strategy approach, when you have few people, it just makes a whole lot of sense from an operational perspective too. And so I think as it's great when the strategy and the right thing to do can align with making your life a little easier in terms of having a holistic approach.
Right, and then having the data to back it all up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, in the past you'd have somebody writing a story for the alumni magazine, and then somebody else in another department, writing something for the web. And I think there's much more focus now on saying, okay, we've got this great content that speaks to our institution and is really valuable content to our audiences. How do we distribute that content in a way that makes sense for all of our audiences? So it's much more, I keep using the word integrated, but it's much more integrated across functions that historically haven't necessarily worked together.
Yeah.
Well, we're winding down on time here.
We are.
Yeah.
Went so fast.
Good conversations too, right? I did want to offer if you could plug one more thing about the AMA Symposium and give your greatest sales pitch for why this is a worthwhile endeavor for you to attend, and what value you can get out of going in person. Please share away.
Well, this is the 25th anniversary of the symposium, which is really amazing when you think about it, that this group has been gathering for 25 years and sharing their expertise and networking And it's gotten bigger every year. Last year we had over 1,100 attendees. We're anticipating breaking that record again this year. It is really the largest gathering of higher ed marketing professionals out there. So in addition to great presentations and great keynote speeches, it's just a great opportunity to meet people informally, network, learn what other people are doing. So great presentations, great conversation, and we're in Austin. So like, what could be more fun than being in Austin?
Right. And Elizabeth?
Well, I think, Deb kind of covered it all. I will say that I always come away from the conference inspired and having a whole notepad of ideas about things to explore and implement with my staff here at St. Mary's after I've gone to the conference, whether it's something that someone suggested or something that comes to mind while I'm sitting and having that concentrated time to just kind of take a break from the day-to-day grind and get creative. So for me, it's always a creativity boost to go and hear about what other people are doing, to think about new strategies for myself based on the learning that happens there. And then, our colleagues are great. Everybody's really collegial and open and wanting to share, and I think that you get the best of that when you're kind of all in the same room together. So that's my plug.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And so both to you, Deb, and to you, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you,
Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick, for having us.
Yes, I hope you safe travels to Austin. I hope for great learning and a great experience with colleagues from around the nation, perhaps around the world. And I also wanted to give one last thanks to our sponsors, OmniUpdate and mStoner, who make Higher Ed Live possible. So, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.